May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Please be seated. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And the Word became flesh and lived among us. Right there from the beginning of the Gospel of John, we have the heart of what Christmas is all about. But what does it mean? It's not exactly clear, like so much else in the Bible. But this is one of those great miracles. And it's so deep. That God, who was from the beginning, who through the Word spoke creation into being, created us, created the world, created all things, chose to become part of his own creation and to put himself in our hands as a helpless infant. Just think about that for a minute. God didn't come as an adult into the world, but came into the world as an infant to be cared for by his own creation. That's an amazing trust that was placed in us. That God trusted us to take care of God, instead of the other way around, like it's always been. We try to think of a worldly example of this. It doesn't quite work, but there are some things that come kind of close. I bet all of you know who Bill Gates is. Except for maybe some of the younger. The creator of Microsoft. One of the most powerful and richest men in the U.S. And in almost all of our houses in some way, shape, or form. Think of Bill Gates suddenly saying, well, I've got this creation of mine, Microsoft Windows. And just to see what it's like, I'm going to say, all of you out there, take care of my creation for me. Take care of my company. Make sure that it lives and prospers. Guide the development of Windows. Take care of me. I trust you. Can you ever imagine that happening? I definitely can't. But that doesn't quite get it. Because that's us taking care of his creation. That's being stewards. It goes even a step further than that, in a way that's even harder to describe. If we think of those people that we know that create things, take for example a carpenter who builds a house. That carpenter knows absolutely about the specifications of the house, exactly what materials go into building it, where the wires need to be run, where the plumbing needs to be run, all of the things that need to be hooked up, how it works together. But they don't really understand what it means to be the house. That's what God did as the creator. Became his own creation. To to understand what it means to be human. Now, we can see in this book the result of that experiment, of that miracle, of God doing that. Because if we look at God as people have understood Him, as people have written about God and experienced God in the Old Testament and in the New Testament, you could almost say it's a different God. In the Old Testament, mostly, God is all-powerful. God is directing things. God is guiding and watching over Israel. And God is vengeful. Very controlling. In the New Testament, God is forgiving. God is loving. God is guiding and calling. Now, both of those appear in both New and Old Testament, but the balance is very different. The balance changes at this moment when God became flesh and walked among us. Now, this may be a change in how we understand God, and it may be a change in how God understands us. I don't know. But it doesn't really matter. The world changed at that moment when God chose to come and be one of us. The Word became flesh and walked among us. It's an amazing miracle. And the meaning continues to go even deeper than what I've already talked about. Because what does it mean for us that God trusted us so much that He came into the world as an infant to be cared for? Helpless in our hands. That trust in His creation, in us. What does it mean that we were given that duty to care for God, just as God cares for us? It means it's about a relationship. We're not just creator and created. It's much more like parent and child. But at this moment, which is the parent and which is the child? It switches. So not only does God care for us, guide us, and sustain us, but we care for God and guide God and sustain God. And as part of that relationship, we are called to guide and care for those around us, to look out for those in need, just as God looks out for us when we are in need. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. And the Word became flesh and lived among us. And we have seen His glory, the glory as of the Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. This is as much about Jesus Christ as it is about every single one of us. When we bring Jesus anew into the world and show people that we have this relationship with God, then we are helping to bring about God's kingdom. And we are doing what that reading that I read earlier from Matthew said. When you do this for the least of these, you do it also for me. And so on this glorious day, Christmas, when we celebrate Emmanuel, God with us, with God's help, we can share Christ with the world.